Hello Internet and welcome to Flying Quad Bikes. So this is the Warfare Evolution update, and honestly, it kind of just came out of nowhere, appeared, a couple weeks later it was here, so that's exciting. Bring my little flying quad bike around real quick. You can see this is making use of some of the new, well, I think, whoa, don't know why it pitched down all of a sudden. It does not like... Oh, it's because the wheels are torquing. Oh boy. I've hit a tree. You know, they always said quad bikes were dangerous. This is sort of making use of a lot of the new vanilla editions, some of which I'm very excited about. Let's start with these little thrusters. So in the thruster group, we have these new sort of flat turbofan looking thrusters. There is a variety, so you've got a small one, you've got a small one with 4 corners, you have a big one with 4 corners. So that's kind of a nice little way to make, you know, things like a little quad bike or a little drone looking quadcopter thing. You can use them for a variety of ships and whatnot. They just kind of add a little bit of style. And interestingly, the big one is 3 by 2 blocks. And the small one is actually a 1 by 1 atmospheric thruster, which we've not had before. The normal atmospheric thrusters are 1 by 3, and then 3 by 3 by 5. This is actually a way to make thrust for atmospheric ships much smaller. You can kind of see a benefit back here at the back. Those thrusters are very well integrated into the ship. They're working thrusters, they move the thing forward, but they don't really look it. And that's really kind of nice, because it means we can start making atmospheric ships that don't have big turbine engines sticking off the sides that, you know, kind of look awkward in some situations. Now, the thing I'm most excited about, and you can tell it best up here, this isn't some subgridding, you know, putting blocks through other blocks trick. These are 1 by 1 suspension blocks. So the traditional suspension was sort of 1 by 1 by 2 long, and then the wheel was sticking out. These are 1 by 1, so you can get them much closer together, which means especially on... Let's flip this vehicle. Which means especially on things like this that is even wide and supposed to be small, these wheels fit the scale much better. Additionally, you may notice these panels. Now, you can sort of get away with some of this in the past, sticking panels around wheels and, you know, making it look like you have close mudguards, but the game didn't like it. Not only was it a real struggle to make this happen, especially in survival where you have to place the block, you know, properly, occasionally, if you actually use something with things around the wheels like this, it would, after, you know, a little while of driving, it would generally kind of lock up or stick or something bad would happen. It caused a bunch of annoyance. I've had it happen to me on a few occasions, but all that's changed. So I can just get rid of that. Look at that. Easy as pie. It doesn't look that impressive because it's just placing a block, but to place a block, quite literally, this block is in the wheel. That is taking up the space of the wheel. It isn't, you know, sitting above it. There's no connection point above it. This is incredible. This is going to make detailing for rovers and wheeled vehicles so much more exciting and enjoyable. And it should hopefully cut out on a bit of that sort of clangy weirdness that would happen. Because if I hop in and drive along the ground, you can kind of see, so the wheels are clipping through, And that would happen, you know, traditionally. When you did things like this, the wheels would clip through. But that was what caused the issue. And I feel pretty certain that the way they've solved the placement problem with wheels involved essentially making the wheel no longer collide with the grid it's attached to. So, yes, it clips through visually, and that's not ideal, but if these were, you know, half blocks or something a little bit more robust than a panel, you wouldn't even notice. I could, in theory, build the mudguards differently to give a little more clearance, because these are very tight. Hopefully, now I've not tested this, so this is just me believing in my heart, but hopefully vehicles in the future that have things very close to the wheels won't struggle with them. So only time will tell if that is the case, but I hope it is. And I forgot these when I was building this quad bike originally. We now have armor panels that are curved, which is a nice little addition. So for things like this, honestly, that kind of works a little better. So in addition to those sort of main changes, there is an entire new scenario to the game. It is the space standoff, which I haven't messed around with, but my guess is it is very similar and sort of takes the place of the sort of classic rival platforms scenario. So this one, essentially, you had like a red team and a blue team. They each have their own spawn with a little platform on an asteroid. They have a bunch of ships to start with, and they can upgrade them, do whatever to them, and then you fight. That seems to be a similar idea of this, but using a lot of the more advanced functions that have been added to the game, the sort of back-end scenario controls and timing stuff that we saw in like the scrap race scenario. So this should be pretty cool. Now there have also been your standard sort of performance improvements, making the game run better, and I believe there was something with upgrading how the ricochet system works for ammo and bullets. I don't know the extent of that necessarily, and it's kind of... I guess I could try and test something out. What do you do? Would just dent the armor. Well, actually, hold on. So when I shoot this cornery bit, I don't recall that sort of spray off to the side. I don't know if that's part of it. That may just be a visual effect. Well, it is a visual effect, but I don't know if that is part of the change or if that always happened. It's hard to say, but should make actual combat a little more interesting. And speaking of combat, that is an interesting facet of this. So aside from the improvements to Ricochet and the new scenario, most of this update doesn't really seem too combat focused. Now, I suppose the this quad bike thing kind of represents the bulk of the vanilla update outside of the free scenario, and that free scenario probably did take up a large amount of their time and effort. You know, it's interesting that they kind of lump this in as a warfare update. I think I'll go into a little bit more into my thoughts on that and things related to it here in a little bit. But for now, I also want to start looking through the DLC stuff that was added, because there was a lot in the concurrently released Decorative Pack 3 update, which again, completely unrelated to warfare, I guess. I guess you need spoils of war to wage war for, but yeah, let's start looking. So, the first sort of thing, and I mean, I'm not particularly intrigued by these, but we have these scaffold blocks, which I guess are essentially very cheap to produce, blocks that you can build stuff with. I was curious, so you can walk through it, which is good. I betcha. Yeah, okay. So you can walk through the inside. You could also, of course, flip this around, and then it's like a underslung bridge. You could have railings up the top. So that's kind of a fun little feature, and I suppose it gives you some decorative and construction ability in a much smaller space, because you could obviously do something very similar to this before, essentially just making a box with catwalk down the bottom. You could use unwelded plates along each side. So it's cool and it's in as a thing, but I don't particularly see myself getting much use out of it. Though I am noticing as I kind of flick through these, and again, this is me being a real professional, there are some interesting sort of decorative pieces and actual functional bits. So we have a ladder for them. So again, I don't know, I don't know if it's my style necessarily, but this is a pretty well thought out little addition. They seem to have a lot of the stuff you'd want in this sort of thing. And I could very well see this being useful as, scaffolding around industrial sites, or even as like, scaffolding building a building. If you were building a big base, I could see like having these go up and then, platforms to walk along and weld stuff. Is it all that useful in Space Engineers with jetpacks? Not necessarily. And I also don't think these would be that easy to build if you were doing a no jetpack run, but, still a neat little feature. Now, some things I do see myself using from the DLC pack are all of the decorative things, which makes sense as a decorative pack. So I've just got a big old line of adventure here, and we're going to look through it all. So starting here, this is the Inset kitchen block. So something I've noticed about this pack in general, it kind of goes with the keen art people, who I really should probably learn their names because they're quite good. Their sort of thing of making blocks multifunction. They've gotten really good at realizing, it's a block, so it's going to go, in theory, it's kind of designed to go into a wall like that. So you would just have access to that. But you can have some variety, because now I can have access to this side, and that's a different decorative block. It's the same thing, but they've combined two blocks into one. If you want, they're set up perfectly so you can just have the two sides next to each other, covering up the other bits, and bam, look at that. I'm kind of exploring these live to a degree. Ooh. And that's a very cool feature. I kind of noticed it with this, but it's nice that you have access to that sort of cargo thing from both sides. But the fact that you can have cargo in this little kitchen setup now means you have somewhere you can put like all the clean cola you get, all that stuff. It can go in there. It's just a little bit of role-playing fun. And that's something that I think some of the decorative packs have missed in the past, is finding good ways to use these blocks. Because sure, it's great that they look good, but, it's not like I can pop something into microwave and heat it up. It's not going to work. So it's nice to have a little bit of in-game functionality built in, even if it's not useful. It's kind of, at the end of the day, we're all just here pressing buttons, so it's nice to have some buttons to press. So moving on, this is the Inset Entertainment Corner. And this thing, if we kind of look around it, it's actually not as complex. There's kind of only this side, You've got this with a little bit of detail, so it looks a little like a server rack. But we have a lot of blocks that already kind of look like server racks. But this is kind of a neat little thing. So again, it's all decorative. We got a little gaming console of sorts. Oh, that's fun. The little controllers are terminals for it. It's a cute little feature. But I believe this works. Yeah, so this essentially works as a jukebox, and it's under the jukebox build. So interestingly, I can't seem to get it to play. Do I have to... No? Oh, there are some very small controls. There we go. It's playing whatever that is. I think I have my music turned way down or off. But, yeah, it's also a screen, so if you don't want script, you could have text displayed there. You can have a nice advert for Cosmic Coffee, like a commercial on TV. That's kind of the idea here, is it's a TV. So we have a little bit of sort of advanced decoration ability. Also, and I'm recording this after I recorded the main video, I somehow completely missed the fish. So, under the planters thing, in here, fish tank. And I've got to say, I like the high pressure warning, though it's probably not good for the fish. I've got to say, well, it looks pretty good. Just don't watch the fish too closely. They are just in little loops, but there's a lot of different motion going on. I like the bubbles. You know, the logic of a fish tank in zero gravity doesn't make a ton of sense, but I'm sure they'll be fine. Yeah, so it's not really, you know, there's not too much going on. I like how you've got the little end bit. So, again, you can use this as two-sided. Granted, this side isn't that impressive. But yeah, fish. Moving on again, we're getting into some of the more utilitarian additions in this pack. This is the inset button panel. And as I poke my way around it to figure out what is a button. Yeah, these seem to just be screens, which is nice. I'm not allowed to open that. That screens. Oh, here are buttons. So interestingly, most of the things, were there buttons on the sides of this that I missed? No, I'm clacking all over the place, but nothing seems to be a button. So, that's they're kind of hidden away, though I guess that's nice for a decorative pack. But, if I want to, I could have my entertainment console hooked up to here. Press that, see it's offline, online, you know, it's a button. But it is kind of nice that it's in a wall, and it does highlight a bit of the sort of gameplay use of these sort of things. All of our traditional buttons have been sort of offset out as a block. You know, it's taking up this cube, which means I'd have a wall here. This is in the cube space. If this were a narrow passage and I wanted a light above it, I can't have it. So, this being in the wall, serving as a wall, does have some gameplay use. Okay, so moving on again, we have this nice little inset couch, which, no, that's just decorative. But you can see I can sit on it like a normal couch, you know, kind of works as is, but because it's a full block and it provides a wall, That kind of adds some utility. And it fits this theme well, because the whole vibe of this is sort of, you know, modular spaceship, everything's set into the walls, compact. You could easily see this like a wall sliding down here, it flips out and becomes a bed. It doesn't, but, you know, that's sort of the vibe, is that very minimalist, compact construction. And additionally, because, again, the whole theme of this is multi-use, we get the reflections on this glass seem real screwed up. But we get this nice little greenery thing, like a little terrarium, in there as well. So you could have a couch here, flip it around, have a nice little greenery wall behind it. That'll be nice on a station. This one also has a little bit of detail on the third side, this little panel thingy that could be useful. So yeah, nice little bit of decoration. Now, speaking of beds in walls, here's a bed in a wall. Now, interestingly, this does have this little shutter thing that conceptually would roll down, but I don't believe it does. Not seeing like a button or anything. That would be kind of nice, but it would also be a block with two functions, which I don't think the game can support. But this and variants, so we have this version of the bed that is sort of pass through, so you can access it from either side. And then this one here, which is a full block instead of those that are half blocks, and also has a little bit of cargo locker detail that has storage in it. You can access the storage from inside. So these are kind of nice little bed additions. And the thing that excites me most about them, this is an actual bed. And it kind of looks shitty, I'll be honest. The art is good, but it's a very thin mattress on that sucker. But this is an actual bed. The bed we've had access to previously is this weird socket with, you know, tie-down straps around it, and an awkward little window sticking out the back. Now, it worked fine. It's a lovely addition, a lovely little bed, and it does make sense in space, you know. You want to strap yourself down when you can, but for a situation like on a planet, or honestly on most spaceships and space engineers, because this is a universe that has gravity generator technology, this makes a lot more sense. This is the type of bed I would want to sleep in if I were in space. I like that it has some little like decorative details. I am curious. So if I paint it red, yes, the plushy engineer inside turns red. That's good. It's a bit garish in red. But yeah, that's another thing with this pack. There are a lot of little details and things that make it feel a bit more lived in. I think it really fits the vibe of what I experience in Space Engineers, of wanting it to feel like a space that I'm in. I've not actually... Oh, yeah. I've not looked at what I look like in the bed. Probably should have put on nicer... or changed out of these crummy clothes. But yeah. So not only are you kind of, you know, does it look like a normal bed? It looks like a relatively normal sleeping position. I don't know if I would do it in the space suit, but that's a discussion for a different DLC, or hopefully vanilla feature. So yeah, beds are nice. But say you don't want a bed, say you like to be cool when you sleep and also vertical. We also have these nice little inset cryo chambers, which definitely have a different feel than the homey bed. But yeah, I mean, they look pretty good. Again, it kind of fits the idea of, you know, a very tight ship, sort of submarine looking thing that you could have like rows and rows of these little bays in it. And additionally, This is something that on the large grid vanilla cryopod we don't have. You can actually see just a hint of the player in there, which is kind of a nice addition. The vanilla cryopod is still this sort of frosted blue that, works and doesn't look bad, but this is definitely nicer looking. Now, an interesting note with the cryopods: one, there is obviously a conveyor at the back, which is important, though there is also a conveyor underneath, which the vanilla cryopod doesn't have. So, is it strictly a major benefit? Probably not, but it does allow some slightly improved piping of this one over this one. Granted, it makes more sense for this to be out in a space versus this would be tucked into a wall, and you may not have the room around the back to pipe it up. But just an interesting difference to note. Now, moving on, we have this intense looking machinery, which is the corner medical room. It makes sense because it's in a corner. Now, there's a lot more fine detail on this compared to the vanilla medical room. You still have access port where you can charge up. We've got a bunch of little details, nice little table that obviously isn't useful but looks good. And then you can go in here and change your outfit. So there's not too much to note. Interestingly, it is actually roughly the same dimensions as the normal medical room. The only difference is this one, your access point to change faces sort of into the open space, whereas on the original it's off to the side. So, say you had it built up against a wall like this to fit in, you could access here, but it was always a little awkward to peek into there. Viable if needed, but doesn't look very good. Okay, moving right along and away from some of the sort of fine detail decorative blocks. So we have these three things, which are new shaped LCDs. So these are LCDs in blocks, which is kind of a nice addition. So similar to some of the decorative pieces, this means if, say, you had a tight tunnel and you wanted an LCD down the side, before you would have had to take up this middle block space. Now you don't have to. You have this that's just kind of there. Looking around them, there aren't really too many, fine details. There's the little bit, these odd VGA cables that probably wouldn't be used in the 22nd century or whatever, but who am I to say? But yeah, this adds some interesting ways to kind of have more stuff going on. I could definitely see this curved one, the image panning around on a curved pillar as sort of an advertisement thing. It is interesting to note too, so because we have the ability in LCDs to rotate an image, you can actually rotate around on this corner block, and now it's slightly stretched, but you could have this as it could be above you as you walk through a terminal. It's kind of weird with the world being sideways as I show that, but it gives you some nice variety to make use of these. And talking of interesting LCDs, I think the most interesting one added is this here. So this is the hollow LCD, which is essentially, if I turn it off here, it's just this little bar nice and out of the way. You can walk through it, but then you turn it on comes an LCD. So you can still walk through it, which is cool. So you could have this be one of those sort of, I think they project them on water, but it'll be a sort of waterfall, and then it projects a big do not enter sign at the entrance to a tunnel if you're going the wrong way. You could have this indicate do come through this way because this is the right way. and then you walk through it. I don't know. It's a cool little theory. I don't know how strictly useful it is, but it lets you add a lot of interesting detail, and I could see this being useful for functionality and a little bit of that sci-fi aesthetic. Alright, moving on again, we have power generation, which has gotten a few interesting blocks. So these here are what's called colorable solar panels. Interestingly, we have a normal solar panel rectangle, and then we have these two angled bits. So obviously we don't have angled vanilla solar panels, so that's a neat little addition. The ability to sort of shape them. You could shape these to armor a bit. Interestingly, these are full half block width, which, you know, while a little bulky when looking at it like this, is kind of nice for integrating into armor, because now, say this is the outer hull of my ship, I can stick one of these in here and it fits real nicely. And, well, you probably wouldn't want it necessarily, you can have the solar panel out the other end without an awkward gap. Because you could do this before with a normal solar panel and a full block by just sticking it like that and then filling in around it. And now that's sort of flush, but it leaves this odd space underneath it. These are also, as stated by the name, colorable. So, say you think green attracts more sun. Now they can be green. You can, of course, have blue. You could have yellow. You know, any color you want, you can color these, which is also kind of nice for integrating, because instead of having this awkward blue thing in your gray ship, now, it's still obviously a solar panel there, but, you know, it kind of flows into the color scheme of the ship better. We also have this big honkin' thing, which is the twin-bladed wind turbine. And yeah, I mean, it's a big boy. So it is 5x5x5 wind turbine, whereas the traditional one was 3x3x3. So it's much bigger. Let's just build a little test here. I'm curious if the bigger one produces more power. So both of their wind clearance is poor. They're roughly at the same height. But if I look, the twin-bladed one is producing 205 kilowatts. This one's 194. So very close. That could well be due to slight height difference. You know, this terrain may be slightly lower than over there. And honestly, I don't know exactly how the wind turbine clearances are calculated. If it's the middle of the block, you know, the middle of the block is here. The middle of the block is like, you know, another half block higher on this one, so that could be part of it. I wouldn't say it's a dramatic increase, so they're functionally about the same. Just the new one is much larger, which again fits the sort of keen ethos of, you know, if we make something that's slightly better, we have to give it a notable downside as well. So, interesting little trade-off, but it does look interesting and definitely more sci-fi. Granted, these look pretty sci-fi too, so, you know, either work. This thing, which looks real funky, but this is a beacon, a round beacon. Interestingly, so if we go to the dark side of the planet and place it, you can see it does actually produce light. Kind of, I guess it's glowing from within the ring there. And these lights are on. Let's see if I turn that off. All the lights go out. So that sort of makes sense, but it's much more subtle than the vanilla beacon. with its big blaring sunlight. Now, for different contexts, you probably want the different ones. This new beacon makes a little more sense, maybe just, stuck in the middle of a station. This one definitely looks more light tower-ish, and if you wanted it to be like a signal antenna to, stand as a beacon in the sky, that makes more sense. Now, the last sort of strictly functional decorative blocks I'm going to check, and I believe these are actually vanilla? I have to check that. Yeah, so these are actually vanilla additions. We have a little pillar button and a little pillar access panel, which is lovely, because up until this point, the only sort of freestanding, floating there and you just press it button was the vertical button panel, which is a DLC block. So it's nice to finally have a vanilla version that you can just have out there. So if you only need one button for something, you don't have to just, have one of these and just awkwardly only have one button used. It always felt wasteful of space. So, on to the last little bit. We have crates and barrels, which, again, not really warfare-y, but I guess this is the decorative pack. It's not related to warfare. And they are kind of neat. You have this big pallet of barrels. Oh yeah, you can access them. They're all storage, they sort of work, and they're actually under the same group as the sort of freight box crates, which makes some sense. But you just have some more stuff to, litter around a cargo hold or hangar bay. You can use them for little detailing bits. These crates have a neat little feature where they actually open up. They open up from both sides, so that's kind of cool. And this one little barrel here, interestingly, it doesn't have a normal cap. That is because this is an explosive barrel, and it's essentially a warhead. So, if I go ahead and arm it, you can see the green safety lights are now yellow. And here I am just cleaning my gun around all the explosive cargo barrels, and oh no! Yeah, so that's a fun little thing. That is a terrifyingly massive explosion. I kind of expected that it would be toned down, because I thought the idea was more, generic video game red explodey barrel. You shoot it and you can kind of plan it to kill the enemies around it. It would do that, and it may just also blow up half the ship they're on. Another fun little detail. Could definitely be used somewhere, and, just a fun little thing to mess around with. Now, I want to circle back to something I hinted at earlier, and that was the sort of idea of the warfare updates. And while I think we've gotten some really great stuff out of all of these updates, the series, I think this is the third warfare, it's maybe the fourth update that's been tied to warfare. And something that I still think we are missing from them, and it's something the community strongly thinks so as well, is something to fight. So, Space Engineers, as it is a very lovely sandbox game. You can build a lot, the ability to decorate and make cool things that you enjoy looking at and being in. It's great. It's essentially Lego in space. But it's also a video game, and while you can get a lot of entertainment out of just building and exploring, it would be nice, especially with this warfare concept, to have some more stuff to do war against. Now, Keen already has, built into the game, enemies and enemy installations that you could easily implement spawning into the world independently. This is the, I think it's like the ore processing station from the generic Earth start, which is a survival start, but you start with a base and all that. And this world in general has not been updated since the early days of planets. I think it probably was out when planets were added. Things like this, and the drones that they already spawn by default, that would be a good enough addition. All it needs is a bit of a revamp, and maybe something like the modular encounter system integrated into the game as vanilla. They could even work with Meridius 9, who curates and manages, created that mod, and, have something happen like that. I think the game could really benefit from vanilla, keen created cargo ships and bases around both planets and in space. We do have cargo ships in space. There are random encounters you can find as bases and space pirate things out there. And that's lovely. But it would be nice to have a bit more of that and to get those updated. They've all been from well early in the game. Many of the space cargo ships are from before planets. It would be nice to have sort of new modern encounters using the DLC, showing it off, and making enemies out there to fight. Maybe things that would come target you if you got too close. Things that use the faction system, so you've angered their faction, they start sending drone attacks on you. Having that in the vanilla, straight Space Engineers experience, without needing mods and without needing to load custom worlds where they're already loaded in. The drone found a tree. That would really round out the warfare updates. And that's sort of what I was hoping and have been hoping would be the culmination. So, we'll see if it happens. I sort of thought that it would be a series of 3. We would have the first warfare update, which focused on player-to-player combat. The second, which added ship-to-ship combat stuff. I sort of thought this third one might include AI stuff. With the AI update, I thought, oh, that must be it. And they may well be working towards it. It's a big task, I'm sure, both from an art side, they need people to design the ships, and there's probably a lot of software stuff, optimization to make it so it works and works reliably, even on, relatively low-end PC. And we'll see if that comes. It may be in the future. It may be in a potential Space Engineers 2. Who can say? But for now, I'd say that is this update. That is what's going on with Space Engineers as it currently is. And honestly, I'm excited to build some stuff. So thank you everybody so much for watching. If you want, feel free to become a member to get more fun content like this and the regular content I do. And until next time, bye bye.